Good morning, Senators. I have received correspondence from the Speaker of the House of Assembly advising that the following bill was passed in the House of Assembly and forwarded to the House for its concurrence. Immigration Amendment Act. And you should have within your possession a copy of the act that is being amended. I have received excuses from the following senators: Senator Honorable Fortuna Belrose and Senator Adrian Auger, who are out of state, and Senator Gibeon Ferdinand, who will be unable to attend today's sitting. Senators, please join me in extending sincere condolences to the family of the former Arsene Vigil James, who passed away on Sunday, 29th of July, 2018. He served as the member for Micoud South from 3rd December 2001 to 19th May 2016, leader of the opposition from 2003 to 2004, and Minister for Education 2006 to 2011. Let us stand for a moment of silence. ECS Netball Tournament held in St. Kitts and Nevis on 12th July. St. Lucia also received the award for the most accurate shooting team. Ms. Dasha Eugene was given the award as the most accurate shooter. Ms. Eugene is a student of the Corinth Secondary School and member of the Avengers Netball team. We wish the team all the best. In June, the Speaker of the House of Assembly, the Clerk of Parliament, and I attended the 43rd Conference of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, CPA, Caribbean, the Americas and Atlantic region in the Cayman Islands. At the conference, St. Lucia was elected Chair of the Commonwealth Women's Parliamentarians, CWP, and Chair of the Regional Representative for Group B, consisting of smaller independent countries, from June 2018 for a 3-year term. Mr. Speaker will serve as Chairman of the Regional Representative Group, and I will serve as Chairperson of the Commonwealth Women's Parliamentary Group for 3-year term. The Office of the Parliament took part in a competition on Public Servants' Day held in June, and we placed 3rd. I wish to express my gratitude to the former Presidents of the Senate, Speakers of the House, and former Members of Parliament who contributed to the mock parliamentary debate held on that day, and I applaud the staff of Parliament for their effort. The Speaker of the House and I recently hosted the first Presiding Officers Luncheon for all presiding officers. Since the establishment of our Parliament, we took the opportunity to share with them some of our new endeavors. The lunch was a great success. Statements from ministers.
Madam President, on behalf of the Senate, on behalf of the government of St. Lucia, I would like to express my deepest condolences, heartfelt condolences to the bereaved family of Mr. Arsene James. It took us by surprise and when we heard of his sudden death over the weekend. Madam President, it's always a sad moment when we have to mourn the loss of a loved friend, and sometimes even one that we're not acquainted with, but because the person we may have had close relation with the dead person's family, our hearts are touched, because death is something that no one can fully understand and can deal with. Madam President, I got to know about Mr. James from a distance. Will be etched in my memory for a very long time, because Mr. James exemplified, as a politician, he exemplified humility and expressed a lot of humanity, which is, Madam President, unfortunately, is lacking in our politics today. He was a man, Madam President, I believe, who stood very tall among politicians, in spite of he laying very low. He was a man, Madam President, who was very soft-spoken, but yet still his words were very penetrating. I remember clearly, Madam President, that Mr. James, standing in Parliament, sometimes alone, facing the government side as a brave soldier, not representing just himself, Madam President, but representing the people of St. Lucia in opposition. I remember that very clearly, all by himself, facing sometimes the bloodshot eyes of the government and the foaming mouths of his opponents, political opponents. And he did it very bravely, Madam President, very bravely. And it reminds me, Madam President, that it's not what's around you or against you, it's what's within you that matters. And I'm very happy that Mr. James have left us a very good example of what it is to be a humble politician, one who cares and one who shows deep humility at every time, at all times. He reminds me also, Madam President, that in spite of the political oppositions that one may face, you can still smile. And I can still see his smile across the aisle in the opposition, especially, again, against the government side at the time. Again, Madam President, it's not what's outside of you, it's what's within you. And I'm happy, Madam President, that he was able to make his contribution in Parliament as Minister of Education. And I'm sure that current generations and generations to come would benefit from the work and the contribution he has made as member for Miku South and as Minister for Education. So, Madam President, I would like again to express my deepest condolences to the family and assure them that my prayers are with them, and I'm hoping that the nation will support the family one way or the other, but especially with the prayers. Thank you.
Press now. Okay. Papers to be laid. Honorable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument Number 48 of 2018, Tourist Duty-Free Shopping System, Colombian Emeralds Order. Statutory Instrument Number 49 of 2018, Price Control Amendment Number 8 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 50 of 2018, Excise Tax Amendment Order Schedule 1 of Number 8 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 51 of 2018, Finance Administration Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or recurrent expenditure for the St. Lucia Education Quality and Improvement Project. Statutory Instrument Number 52 of 2018, Resolution of Parliament to authorize the making of an order for the 2014 supplement to the revised edition of the laws. Statutory Instrument Number 53 of 2018, Price Control Amendment Number 8 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 54 of 2018, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1 Number 9 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 55 of 2018, Fiscal Incentives, Paradise Foods St. Lucia Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 56 of 2018, Supplement to the Revised Edition of Laws Commencement Order. Statutory Instrument Number 52, or 57 rather, of 2018, Invest St. Lucia, Shabusha Investment or Vesting Order. Statutory Instrument Number 58 of 2018, Computer Misuse Act Commencement Order. Statutory Instrument Number 59 of 2018, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 2 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 60 of 2018, Price Control Amendment Number 10 Order. And finally, Madam President, Statutory Instrument Number 61 of 2018, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1, Number 10, Order.
Bills. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Immigration Amendment.
Immigration Amendment.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order Number 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages of this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order Number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Immigration Amendment. Madam President, this is a straightforward amendment. We currently have an Immigration Act, and we are making an amendment to this bill, or to this act rather, Madam President, to include a very important area concerning immigration, and that is what we refer to as Advanced Passenger Information Systems, or APIS. Madam President, it's important that we make this amendment because of the concerns that various jurisdictions within the region, the concerns and situations that they are faced with, whereby they would need the assistance of each other. And this APIS system is a regional initiative whereby individual jurisdictions will be sharing information with each other, information about passengers. And so this bill is making the adjustment to facilitate this new system. So instead of we having Madam President, a standalone act, an APIS Act, we found it better for us to just make an amendment with the existing Immigration Act. And the amendments, as I said earlier, are very straightforward. And I'm hoping that the Senate gives the approval for the amendments of the Immigration Act.
Senators, the question is that the Immigration Amendment Bill be read a second time. Senator Henry.
And thank you, Madam President, for allowing at some point for us to, we'll allow to express our condolences on behalf of the passing of Honorable Asen James. And I'll do that shortly, but to speak briefly to the motion, to the bill that is before us. And of course, we join to support this bill, the amendments to the Immigration Act. But in addition to this, I would just like to share with you through you to this House, some brief comments on the general posture of our immigration policy. Madam President, it's my understanding that an immigration policy of any country should be underpinned by certain values, core values, and not just intellectual concepts. And of course, while we understand the need and we support the initiative for protection of our borders, an immigration policy has far-reaching implications for our country. And of course, we think of it in the context of who, whom, and how will our entire gambit of immigration policies and enactments benefit the population at large. And I would have seen it necessary at this juncture, at this appropriate time for the government side to share with this House, maybe through the Minister for National Security, aspect of our immigration policies. And I speak to specifically two areas of concern that have been discussed. One in terms of our posture towards the country of Venezuela, as well as our posture towards the Chinese. Madam President, I would not suck my teeth if we continue to be treated on this side with a certain kind of disdain, but let it be. Madam President, I am currently in Dominica, assisting in the rebuilding effort, and there are, I dare say, hundreds of St. Lucians who are participating in the rebuilding effort. And it is an interesting task, Madam President. It is taking shape, but it needs so many persons to be part of the effort. For in one night, almost 200% of the country's GDP was wiped away. Middle class and all classes of persons were affected. On Wednesday, passing, Madam President, the Prime Minister of Dominica in his budget address cited that the government of Venezuela had, through their funds, were able to construct 155 new homes for Dominicans. And I thought that was quite interesting that while on Wednesday the Prime Minister of Dominica was sharing praise on Venezuela, that in our jurisdiction I heard that we had taken a posture with Venezuela to institute visa considerations. And I did ask myself the question, is there a regional harmonious approach in dealing with immigration as stipulated in this pieces of legislation? And why would one sister country have one approach to Venezuela while we adopt a different approach? And Madam President, let me tell you that I also have benefited while I'm doing and supporting that through the exercise of the Venezuelan intervention in Dominica in rebuilding. I was able to foster and get almost 120 pieces of uniforms for the school children in the Castries Southeast constituency, which will be going directly to the schools. I will not be handpicking individuals because I find the schools can target these individuals better. But I'm just saying that, Madam President, that while one country and the OECS nationals are benefiting in one way from the Venezuelans, that St. Lucia is adopting an immigration posture, and why the difference? In addition, I would like to ask, as I understand it, that the government has have found it necessary to remove visa restrictions for Chinese. And I ask the question, what is the net benefit to this country? Why? Who are to benefit? Madam President, that particular initiative reminds me of two important stories. One is a very old story and the other one is recent. The old story is one of the children of Israel in Egypt, and the recent one is the Windrush people of the Caribbean who were being treated in a particular way by the UK officials. And of course, persons had to speak in their behalf because all of a sudden the nationals or persons who found themselves in Britain from 1948 had almost become aliens in their place of birth. And it happened in the Bible that Joseph, who was governor in Egypt, invited his brothers to settle there, and they stayed and they multiplied, and years after, Moses had to go down to free them because they were enslaved, because the new persons who were now on the throne of Egypt did not regard them as citizens but as a threat. When we're going to embark on our immigration policies, we need to ask ourselves what are the far-reaching implications for our population. There's some questions that I ask. We use some cliches and we say to our nationals that instead of giving you a fish, we must teach you how to fish, which is good. But what about if foreigners come to St. Lucia and we give them the boat? I'm simply asking, our economic leverage and our patrimony and our heritage are for St. Lucians. And therefore, our immigration posture at all times must safeguard our population and our people. We should be concerned about our middle class, our local businesses, and those who are struggling at this time. And every effort we must make to have a harmonious immigration policy with our region, we must ensure that our population at all times are protected. So these are just a few questions surrounding our immigration, the government's immigration policy. I've read somewhere that the Minister for National Security in a statement said that Venezuela is still our friends. And I read it over and over, and I said, when your friend tells you, Madam President, that they're still your friend, you must ask why is it necessary to make that statement? What has happened? And when it's need to reassure ourselves of friendship, we ask what exactly has happened. We also remind ourselves, Madam President, that sometimes it seems unpopular to take certain positions and to have certain friends. But history will prove you, when you stand in times of difficulties with certain people, history will prove whether it was worthy of standing. Look today, Cuba. At some point in time, it was not very popular to be a friend of Cuba. And here we are today. The benefits, and there's so many professional doctors and engineers that persons have benefited from Cuba. So whatever the posture is, we must remember those very important stories. In 1948, the ship Windrush took Caribbean people. They went to England to rebuild after the war. But some people all of a sudden recognized, and they were threatened by their presence, and decided to detain them and send them back. Some of them didn't even know where they were going to. They only knew England as their home. The children of Israel, generations stayed in Egypt because of the famine there was in Canaan years ago when Joseph was there. They had to dig up the carcass of his tomb and had to leave Egypt under the guidance of Moses. In fact, the story of Moses started off by saying the new Pharaoh was on the throne, knew nothing of the goodness between the children of Israel and Egypt. So these important stories, both in Bible and in recent occurrence around us, the geopolitical scenes happening around us, are so important that it should guide our immigration posture to friends. Yes, we must protect our borders. It's important we do so. Yes, we must always remember that we have friends who may need us at times, and we must also be a city of refuge for those who are in trouble. But also we must remember that we cannot supplant on our population person that we cannot manage. And more importantly, we must safeguard economic leverage for the people of St. Lucia. Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Leader of Opposition Business called on me by name to respond to his query. So I'm duty-bound to stand and respond. I had no intention of speaking on this bill this morning because it is, as the Leader of Government Business has indicated, is a very straightforward piece of legislation. And to find ourselves in concurrence with the rest of the Caribbean, there has been a lot of talk, Madam President, about the issuance of visa on the Venezuelan people. And the Prime Minister was very clear in the reasons why visa restrictions were placed on the Venezuelans. I, as Minister with responsibility for national security, decided that I wanted to get a first-hand glance of what was happening in Venezuela. And I sought permission from my cabinet colleagues, and they agreed that I should have traveled to Venezuela. I did that on the Friday the 20th of July, and I was accompanied by the Acting Commissioner of Police, Mr. Dorian O'Brien, and Mr. George Modest of the Castries Constituency Council. In Venezuela, I met with the Minister of Public Safety and Internal Security, and also the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I must report that the meetings were very cordial, and even Venezuela, the Venezuelan ministers admitted that there is a problem an economic problem. There is. And as such, our information in St. Lucia has told us of certain things that emanate from Venezuela. I will not stand in this house or anywhere else and try to give figures that would put Venezuela in a bad light. I think the information, and that we must trust our security forces, and we must trust our government when decisions like that are made. It does not serve any purpose to go and victimize Venezuela any further by giving figures as to the number of drug shipments that have come here, the number of firearms that we have recovered, and so on. It's a known fact. The exodus of Venezuelans to the Caribbean is well documented. Trinidad is taking punitive action against Venezuelans. Guyana is in uproar. And it is only prudent that we as a government try to protect our people in St. Lucia. Trinidad and Guyana has the size and maybe have the ability to accept those individuals. But St. Lucia, imagine 1.5 million people coming to your country, which is populated by only 180,000. How do we survive that sort of influx? So it is, and I made the statement that the St. Lucia government and the people of St. Lucia are still friends of Venezuela. We accept and recognize that Venezuela has assisted St. Lucia. But it is not that because you're my friend and your actions may cause this discomfort to my people that I should continue and not take any action to make sure that my people are safe. So we are working, and in Venezuela, we formed a committee with the Deputy Commissioner being our liaison officer from St. Lucia and the Minister of Public Security and Internal Security from Venezuela forming that committee. So they are in discussions, and we will be having frequent visits. As a matter of fact, we are planning that the Venezuelans will visit us maybe in about 2 to 3 weeks to come and see what's happening here, and for us to give them the figures so that they can recognize and understand how precarious it is for us if we do not take action. So, like I said, it's not anything personal or not wanting to be as cordial with the Venezuelans. It is just a fact that we have to take security measures to make sure that our people in St. Lucia are secured. So that's it. And I can assure leader of opposition business that I am very, very interested in making sure that we deal with this issue as quickly as possible, that we can assist Venezuela so that they can get back to the economic strength that they used to be and be able to be our friends as in the past. So with those few words, I would take my seat. Thank you.
Senators, the question is that the immigration bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to amend the Immigration Act, Cap. .76 of the revised laws of St. Lucia, 1957.
Senators will take it by clauses. Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Amendment of Section 10A.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Insertion of new Section 10B.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5.
Insertion of new Section 10C.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Clause 6.
Insertion of new Section 10D.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Clause 7.
Amendment of Schedule 1.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Or title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rise and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Immigration Amendment Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Immigration Amendment Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same, as follows. This act may be cited as the Immigration Amendment Act 2018.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned. Oh, the tributes.
Yes. Oh, yes, my apologies. If anybody wants to pay their respects, please proceed.
His condolences on behalf of the opposition, but I would also like to personally express my deepest, sincerest condolences on behalf of the family of the Honorable Arsene James, the deceased. Madam President, particularly Thomas, who share a profession with me and is my senior, and have embraced me from the time I entered the public service from the 80s, and we have remained friends. The one that I always consulted, his older brother, who is the minister, I've always you know, when I meet him, greet him. And of course, the description made by the leader of the government business is accurate in terms of how soft-spoken he is, the way he has handled himself in politics. He's a man of very few words, but when he says whatever he says, it's deep. As well as Mr. George James was my boss, another brother. I think that I don't know how many brothers there are, but a few of them have actually touched my life. And whenever there's death in a family, wherever the person is, there's some mourning by some members of the persons who remain, and therefore we need to take cognizance of this. I do not judge in death. What is there for us, Madam President, I wish to suggest is that whenever death strikes, it is a constant reminder for those of us who are alive that at some point in time, sooner, God forbid, or later, we will be victimized by life's final common denominator that we call death. And when such happens, we know that we will have to account to somebody different than one who sits in your chair or anywhere else. And therefore, the best we can do is to live humbly and peaceful. That I live with this house on the passing of such a person. Thank you very much.
Honourable Minister for Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Madam President. I too stand here with a heavy heart this morning on the passing of our brother, Mr. Asin James. I wish to express my deepest condolences to his family, his friends, the many students whom he educated, the many St. Lucians who knew him. I wish to express my condolences. Madam President, one of the things on reflection that I just wish to share with this House about Mr. James was, and of course our fellow senator mentioned, his matter-of-fact way of dealing with things. He was just such a principled person and somebody that we are really, really and truly dearly missing. I remember once in this house, Madam President, when he was being cheated by another parliamentarian. He was presenting and he was, and he simply looked down at the other parliamentarian in his composed manner and asked, "Are you speaking to me?" And he continued. So that parliamentarian did not heed that warning. He continued. And Mr. James again looked at him and said, "Am I your child?" And he went back to his presentation. And I thought that was so instructive. The parliamentarian then got the message and kept quiet for the rest of the sitting. So it is these little things about him that reminds one of how to take life very serious. And the principle in him always showed, whether at home, here in this honorable house in Cabinet, the gentleman that he was is what I remember. And I hope that his memory lives with us and is an example for all of us forever.
Senator Thomas Francis.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, it is John Ruskin who said, and I quote, "To yield reverence to another, to hold ourselves and our lives at his disposal, is the noblest state in which a man can live in this world," unquote. The late Asin James was such a noble man. Over the past few days since his passing, I have been quite heartened and quite inspired by the outpour of tributes from people, from St. Lucians of all And I remember reading that he gave over 60 years of service in the education sector, in parliament, in his community, and he did so with compassion. He did so selflessly. He did so with a sense of integrity. The leader of government business mentioned the time when he stood in the House and he was the leader of the opposition and the lone member on the opposition bench, how he did that with class. And he demonstrated that even if he was alone on that side, that he could have represented St. Lucians fairly in his arguments in this honorable House. His humility was unsurpassed. Madam President, I recall when I first met him, he had just been elected as parliamentary representative from Micoud South. I was introduced to him by a friend, and he said to me, well, the friend said, well, look, I'm introducing to you a gem from the West. And he said, I know who you are. You have earned citizenship on the East Coast through your matrimonial connections. Therefore, you are one of us. I welcome you to Micoud. Don't be a stranger. I am always in Deriso, except when I'm up north doing the business of the people of St. Lucia. So don't be a stranger. And I thought that was so profound. So every time we met, I would remind him of my acquired citizenship and the warmth which he extended to me as a girl from the West, and we always laughed about it. I do share good relationships with some of his family and extended family, so on this occasion I would like to extend my deepest condolences to all of them, and to just ask the Almighty to bless him as he goes to the great beyond, and may his good soul rest in perfect peace. Thank you, Madam President.
Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to join my fellow senators in expressing my sincere condolences to the family of Honorable Asen James. I didn't spend much time with the Honorable Asen James, but the little time that I spent with him, I found him to be very unassuming, but very resolute in his beliefs. I must say that he was a true soldier of the United Workers' Party, and by extension, the people of Micoud South. It is always custom to hear people say all good things about an individual when they have gone to the great beyond, or as one of my friends on the opposite side many years ago would say, his terrestrial demise. Mr. James received, but the good thing about Mr. James is that he received his accolades while he was alive. People always commented about his goodness and his ability to remain calm in the face of adversity, and to remain calm when you're ravaged by 15, 16 other persons on the other side. Right. The caliber of those individuals says a lot about Mr. James. Right. Mr. James loved his people with a passion. He worked most of his life as a teacher in Micoud, and then became a parliamentarian. And as a result of that, he, unlike Claudius, my brother said, although he is entitled to a subvention to be able to reside in Castries when he was late, he preferred to travel every evening after work, and even after attending official functions, he would travel to Deriso. I remembered one time when we were looking for a Governor General, somebody made a joke with him and said, Mr. James, we want you to be Governor General. And he laughed. And he said, that would not happen. How can he survive in Castries when his people are in Deriso? So, and that just says, for sharing Mr. James with us, for allowing him to serve the people of St. Lucia in the manner in which he did, and especially my good friend George, who was at St. Mary's College, a little ahead of me, but we at St. Mary's College together. I want to tell him that I'm there for him, and whatever I can do, I will try my very best to do for him. I read an article by my brother Claudius Francis, where he mentioned how noble Mr. James was, in that he traveled to Barbados and he was given all the pomp and ceremony, and Mr. James, in his usual quiet way, was not even acknowledged. And then Claudius decided, well, no, if Mr. James is not given the same facilities, then he would go along with Mr. James. And I know Claudius is one of the fiercest Labour Party supporters, and for him to have done that for Mr. James says a lot of the friendship that he and Mr. James shared. So on behalf of my family and the United Workers' Party family and St. Lucians on the whole, I want to say thank you, Mr. James, for the service that you have rendered to St. Lucia.
Senator Mangal.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise as well to express my sincere condolences to the family and friends of the late Honorable Asen James. It is a sad day for us in this country. We have lost a gem, we have lost a great leader, we have lost a great man from the East. For the Bible itself says that there are many great men that shall rise from the East. And indeed, Mr. James was a great man. having served in the education sector as a teacher and as a principal. Madam President, there is no greater way for somebody to make a contribution in any society than to educate others, to pass on the knowledge that you have to your fellow citizens and to your fellow friends. And that Mr. James has done in the Mico area in particular. The results of which have seen many of our persons being trained, and we have many professionals. Our human resource has expounded over the years because of great men like Mr. James. So the Mico area has lost a great man. I personally know of a lot of his contributions in the area, for I as well do have my roots planted in the Mico Diga area. This is the home of the Mangal family. Any Mangals in St. Lucia, they are all originated from the Diga Mico area, from the east. We are also from the east. So I normally speak to my many families and friends down there, and I know of the enormous contribution, the unselfish acts that he did. He would have given his all to his friends, to his families, and to constituency in the Mico South area. And you could see the joy in his heart. I remember being at the opening ceremony of the Diga Road Rehabilitation Project where Mr. James spoke, and being a member of the Mico South constituency, I know of the many plans. I heard him speak and articulate of the many plans and the many things that he would like to work alongside with the Prime Minister in achieving for the people of Mico South. So certainly, I know the United Workers' Party will miss him. I know certainly the people of Mico South will miss him. The country of St. Lucia has lost a great vision.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, the Minister for Education, in describing Mr. Asen James when he responded to the member opposite in his time, you know, it reminds me of a verse of scripture which speaks of a soft word turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. And I am not too sure if Mr. James lived by these words, but certainly he was a man of soft words and give soft answers, but penetrating effects. I never saw this man angry. And, Madam President, I said I knew of the man in Parliament. And most of the time, he was on the opposite side, facing 15 or 16 men. And I described the man earlier with foaming mouths and bloodshot eyes. But he was not intimidated by this, Mr. President, Madam President. Never. And it showed what was within the man, Madam President. I express it that way, Mr. President, Madam President, because he was a very calm gentleman. He expressed, you know, like life was bigger than politics. He never took...
Honorable Leader of Government Business, I just want to remind you that we need to speak of each other in parliamentary terms. Please proceed.
Madam President, I was expressing, Madam President, how the man, it doesn't matter what he was faced with, he was very calm within. And I'm not saying that the opposition had bloodshot eyes or foaming mouths. It was just an expression that doesn't matter what he was faced with. It was more of what was within him that mattered. Thank you, Madam President. So, Madam President, with these words, I just want to say that I would like to move that the Senate stand adjourned sine die. Thank you.
Senators, the question is that the Senate do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
All rise.